Hi, this is episode 110 of Achieve Your Ambitious Mom Life. I'm your host, Anoki Kapasi. When you're dealing with competing demands and priorities, it can feel like there is no clean place to land. Just from a pure logistics stance, you're forced to become the manager of everyone and everything. And so the result is that your life feels really reactive instead of designed. But that cuts even deeper internally. You could look successful on paper, but still feel disconnected, stuck, and even think quietly that you might just get it all wrong again. Now, my next guest makes the argument that this isn't because you're incapable, but maybe it's because you're working off of an expired narrative of who you are. When you're stuck in a really old loop, it can get hard to trust yourself, to see clearly, and choose your next step from a really grounded place. So my guest today is Riana Malia, a board-certified neurosomatic practitioner who helps high-achieving women break old patterns, regulate their nervous system, and make clear decisions. As a STEM-trained woman balancing life in science and motherhood, this conversation is going to help you get clear on what you want next and how to take that next step, career or otherwise, with more confidence. In this episode, Riana brings a unique lens. She talks about identity level change that doesn't require you to relive your whole story as with traditional therapy. Now, this is one of my longer interviews, partially because Riana gets really vulnerable about her life and the pivotal moments that led her to her quantum time release protocol. She also talks about two different types of memory and the importance of knowing which one we're operating from. She shares simple strategies for how to set boundaries on people pleasing, make clean yes or clean no choices, and rewiring your thoughts in 72 hours. If you want to make decisions without betraying your future self, then stay with us for this conversation. Are you looking for a way to blend success and motherhood without losing sight of who you are? I get it. I've been there too. Hi, I'm Anoki, a PhD researcher, business owner, and homeschooling mom of 2 boys. As your life coach, I help moms like you create a life you love at home and at work. If you're ready to stop feeling overwhelmed, overscheduled, and overlooked, and want a clear roadmap to a balanced life, a meaningful career, and finally feeling like yourself again while being the awesome mama that you are, you're in the right place. In this journey to create the life you truly desire, it's time to rediscover your dreams and achieve your ambitious mom life. Before we start, I want to make sure that you tap the follow button by subscribing to the show. It'll appear on your playlist automatically every week, and you'll save yourself a lot of time instead of hunting down the episodes. Okay, now back to the show. Well, hello, everyone. I'm so excited about today's show because my guest today is revolutionizing how high-achieving women show up in their life. Riana Malia has been in the coaching and personal development world for over 20 years, and she brings together so many different approaches. She's a board-certified neurosomatic practitioner. She's trained in LLP, quantum time release, and trauma-conscious transformation coaching. You're going to learn about Riana's work today and 2 frameworks that she created. One is called the Clear to Create method, and the other is Quantum Pattern Protocol. She blends neuroscience with emotional healing and quantum work to help women who feel like they've done all the personal development work but are still stuck. She was named one of New York Weekly's top 30 empowering women entrepreneurs to watch in 2025. Riana works with leaders, entrepreneurs, and women. And you know, on my show, we're all about balancing your ambitions with motherhood. And Riana is a great example of this. When she's not working with clients or speaking, she's spending time with her husband, Pete, and daughter, Maddie, by the ocean, probably with some cheese and rosé in hand. Welcome, Riana.
Thank you.
Well, I also just really love hearing about how women are able to find their version of success and also build a very strong family relationship. You know, it's part of my mission to help ambitious women balance those very 2 different parts of their lives. So I just like coming across women who are able to navigate that really well and honor both of those parts. Anyways, I think this is going to be a really great conversation. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm going to lead right into the balancing part. Many moms that come from highly skilled professions a lot of my listeners are women in STEM, science and tech, and they feel really connected when it comes to themselves, their identity on paper, ticking all the boxes of success. But inside, they feel really disconnected and not like their former successful selves. So, from your perspective, what's actually going on for ambitious moms when they feel this way?
Such a great question. So, in addition to all of the lovely things that you shared, so really, what I do is I'm an identity architect. And when we talk about identity, so often, especially like you were talking about, we're multifaceted, we're multi-hyphenate, right? We can be really successful and be soft. We can be a leader and still want to be taken care of in some ways. Like we get to be both and.
Mm-hmm.
The disconnect, I think, happens a lot of times when we're still holding on to an identity that was a past version or something that was, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 5 years ago, it doesn't matter. But when we're still living from that old identity, we can't go beyond that. So I always like to use the visual of like, we're standing at a bridge and imagine you're standing at this bridge and whatever the most beautiful bridge for you. I'm a sparkly girl, so whatever it would be sparkly. So imagine the bridge and you're standing at this bridge and right behind you is the current version of you, like this identity that you have been attached to in all the ways. And we are so grateful for her and she got us here, but she can't take us to what's next. So it's almost like loving her, being thankful for her, and also then taking a step onto that bridge because on the other side of that bridge is this next identity, this next level for you that as we walk closer over that bridge, her voice, which is your voice, starts to get louder. And we're talking about like, what are you stepping into in this next level identity? And then it's like you just kind of melt together. So from a visual perspective, it's so important to understand that again, and a lot of that is all operating at an unconscious level, right? So it's really important to talk about the difference between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind when it comes to all of these things and these feelings and this like disconnect of I'm so good over here, but then why does it feel so off over here? And if you think about your body and everything from the neck up is our conscious mind, right? It's our critical faculties, it's our goal setter. We use it all day long and it's 10%, which the rest of our body, everything from the neck down, the other 90% is our unconscious mind. So if the conscious is our goal setter, the unconscious is the goal getter. It's the operating system. It's the general. But most importantly, it is the literal library of everything we've ever experienced in our life. Everything we felt, said, done to us, said to others, it's all stored at a cellular level. So understanding that, because when we talk about memory, we think about in the brain, which of course it lives in the circuitry, but memory is cellular. And we know this to be true. And so when there's all of this stuff that's being held on to, 90% of who we are, we picked up between the ages of 0 and 7. So the sadness, the fear, the guilt, the shame, any of the stories or the limiting beliefs or the limiting decisions and all of that is held in our body at an unconscious level. And so if we don't release it properly, without going back into any of the story and the trauma, we're not going to go back and like unpack what happened when you were 5 or how horrible your ex-husband was or your boss, none of that. We can actually alleviate so many of the things that we manifest physically, which anger, anxiety, overwhelm, depression, autoimmune disorders, illness, injury, disease, even physical weight. I don't know about your listener, like I'm 49, perimenopause, a little ADD, like some of the, the physical weight that comes along with this stage of life, we can't release it because women's nervous systems are designed very differently than men. And if there's part of us that doesn't feel safe from a nervous system perspective, again, the disconnect, the confusion, the wondering, our body has to keep us safe and protected. And part of that is actually physically holding on to weight. So probably one of the most important things I want to say is it's not your fault. So many ambitious women are like, why can't I figure this out? Like, I'm brilliant. I'm emotionally intelligent.
Exactly.
So clear, like what is wrong with me? You cannot solve a problem with the same mind that created it. So if you could have figured this out, you would have. You're brilliant.
Right.
So take any of the self-blame off the table because there's nothing that you did or didn't do to change this. It's about getting all of that kind of cleared out and then getting crystal clear on who is this next level version of your identity. Between now and dead, what do you want? Who are you? Outside of the roles, the mama, the CEO, the wife, the whatever it is, like who are you now and how can we then design a life that you love around this new identity that doesn't feel disconnected and so like wildly different than all the other areas of your life.
Wow, that was really rich. You are tapping into the conscious and unconscious parts, and there's so much neuroscience behind what you are explaining here. through life planning, one of our first steps is self-discovery. So it is becoming a little self-aware of these things that are inside of you that you haven't put a name to necessarily, and then articulating them and then bringing them into your conscious. But what I find is that more and more women that I come across, it's very in line with what you're saying, that their definition of success was one thing and it served them well pre-motherhood, but motherhood being such a huge life transition, especially for a high achiever, where that part of you doesn't go away. You still have these big ambitious goals and you still are goal oriented, but you now have a new definition of success that we haven't stopped to take in time to, redefine. It may include some things and not include other things. And when you don't take the time to do that, you are going to stay stuck. I liked what you were saying about the cellular memory because I am a biomedical scientist by training. And so, I worked a lot with, cell biology and recombinant engineering, and also epigenetics was kind of a new thing that I was hearing about back in my laboratory days. And so I know that that is not necessarily the part that you're operating from, but it does remind me that there is cellular memory that even transcends generations, things that our relatives and ancestors experienced that's part of now their cellular operation does get passed down to us. And what I also really, really like about what you're saying is the empowerment that you are providing, that your methods are providing, because the thing that irks me is when we stay in that victim mindset, right? Like you're saying, like a lot of why we're stuck isn't our fault. What's brought us to this point, right? That things have happened that were outside of our control to some degree. But there is something we can do about it. That, okay, we are where we are now, but here's what you can do, right? And you provide these tools that empower women. I really like that there is a specific set of actions or process or method in your case that, you can move forward with. And we're going to go definitely deeper into some of these tools and tactics that you provide. I want to ask you, how do these patterns of overwhelm and overgiving show up? Because like you said, we're often doing all these things for other people in our lives, especially once you become a mom. What are some common signs that our nervous system and our identity are out of balance, as you were saying, that old version is not serving us anymore?
Yeah. So how often are you saying, I should? How often are you shoulding all over yourself in your life? I should be doing this. I should be farther along. I should be doing this instead of resting. I should be, so the shoulds are a big one. And also really, really, really getting super clear on how you hold boundaries and what you're saying yes to and why. So a lot of times that people pleasing comes out in ways like, somebody asks you to do something and you say yes to everything. And so when we were looking at that and analyzing that, I was, like, here's a few questions I want you to ask yourself. First of all, take a breath, take a breather and say, hey, listen, let me check my calendar, my life, and I'll get back to you. And then I want you to ask yourself these questions. Am I saying yes to this because I think that if I don't, they're not going to like me, love me, respect me, whatever, fill in the blank? Am I saying yes to this because if I do, then they're going to like me, love me more. They're going to, it's going to benefit me in that way. Then, if either of those are a yes, then the answer to the invite is no. Am I doing this because at the depth of my soul, I really want to do this? If that's a clean yes, then it's a yes. But you need to start being able to actually discern why you are saying yes to something and come back to that place of understanding that your body doesn't understand what it feels like to put yourself first because you have taken care of everyone else's needs for so long. But that once you actually start doing that, you'll feel yourself like re-regulating. But I think a big part of this, and you alluded to it, that I think is so important in any of this conversation is clarity. And, we talk a lot about clarity and awareness in all of this type of work. And that's important. It's the foundation. But I'm not sure how it is for you, but with a lot of my clients, when we are having initial conversations and I'm asking about, like, what are you doing or not doing differently than you're doing or not doing right now on the other side of this, whether that you call it being stuck or disconnected or whatever. And oftentimes it brings tears.
Yes.
A very quiet, I don't know. I don't really know what I want or who I am or what that looks like because I've never thought about it. And that really brings us to kind of like why, like what is the methodology, kind of the overall piece. And so the method, So, oh, you guys can't see this, but my tagline has always been your very best life. Whether we have known each other for 20 minutes or 20 years, I want you to live your version of your very best life. And it's a little different for every one of us. But you can't just go from being held back by childhood stuff and past pain and failed businesses and failed relationships and these underlying things that you maybe don't even say out loud, that, you're not enough, you're not worthy of that kind of love, you're too much, you're whatever, all the things that you say, the voice in your head. You can't just go from all of that to living your very best life. We have to clear before we can create. And you were talking about this a little bit earlier, but like when we talk about that, getting stuck in that victim archetype, but we have to clear the story to create the life. Everybody says, I want a different story. I don't want this feeling. I don't want this disconnect. I don't want this sense of like, I don't know what my purpose is anymore or where I fit in. Well, if you want a different story, you have to stop telling the old one. And we have to clear the cycles to create the confidence, because also in this time of life, there's like this sense of not being able to trust ourselves, because we're like, I thought I knew, and then look how that turned out. So I don't know. I don't know how to pick a career situation, whatever it is. And so everything in the world is cyclical, right? So are the cycles of our life. So when we can actually like go, oh, wow, that's interesting that keeps showing up. So we have to clear those cycles so you can trust yourself again, and being able to make those clean yes and clean no decisions without all that decision fatigue that causes us to either make a decision out of fear or not make one at all. And then we just really stay stuck, right?
Right.
And we have to clear the patterns to create the partnerships. We want loving, aligned, genuine partnerships, romantically, personally, professionally, with our friends, with our family. But when we bring all the old wiring, all the unconscious stuff, all the patterns, we don't get those partnerships. We just keep getting more of the same, which 99% of the time is exactly what we don't want. And we have to clear the resentment to get the results. So many ambitious women almost get what they want, but they never quite get there. And there's underlying resentment. So a lot of times when we're talking about resistance, somebody's like, I'm really resistant to this. The real question is, what are you resenting? And it opens up a completely different perspective. So having said all of that and looking at then the process, clearing, creating, and claiming, but the very first part, before we can actually clear anything, we have to get crystal clear. And I liken it to going to a restaurant and sitting down, and the server comes and says, all right, ladies, what can I get you? And we say, we love a beverage, and we're going to start with a salad, and then, some protein and some, fabulous side. We're like, great, off they go. They come back, they bring us an iced tea and a Caesar salad and some lovely roasted chicken and some, mixed vegetables. And we got exactly what we ordered, 100% what we ordered. Except what we wanted was a sparkling water, an arugula salad with fresh figs and goat cheese, a piece of beautiful halibut, and some roasted asparagus. So the difference is in the clarity. And most 99% of people don't have that level of clarity. And so to get that, we talk about like the clarity codex. So we do like really looking at a values elicitation, non-negotiables, and the desires, which creates your menu. So that in like literally a minute or two, you could look at any person or situation and be able to make a clean yes or clean no decision of even if there's a possibility that they get to be in your life. And it takes away all of that drama.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It absolutely does. That's like a good chunk of life planning. It's a very similar process. Establishing your values are like the foundation of the life plan. And so during the self-discovery, we go through all of that stuff. It, I think, is a very powerful format for getting clarity, where you get your values and your priorities, which I think you called your non-negotiables. And then I do other things like establishing your purpose and passions and preferences and strengths and all these things, and get this sort of profile. And I often compare a life plan to having a GPS, a navigation system. And by the end of it, you'll have this clear roadmap of how you're going to go from where you are to where you want to be. And it's very top heavy, because these things that we're talking about for clarity are really important, because if you don't know where you want to go, then how are you going to get there, right? Like that's so important for you to understand what your vision is. And so life planning is very top heavy. One of the things that really popped out at me when you were talking is you get exactly what you ask for, but not having the clarity to know what to ask for might get you close, but not quite there. And that's true with also defining your goals. A lot of times I'm finding that my clients will have set really ambitious or honorable or altruistic kind of goals. They will absolutely be something that will help, maybe them or somebody else, but it's not what they wanted. They were doing it because it sounds like a good goal to have, but it's not the right goal for them. So the clarity part also really helps with setting not just your vision or completely designing your life, but even something as simple as setting the right goal. So you mentioned patterns, and for my listener who's new to the term quantum patterns, can you provide a quick definition so we're all on the same page?
Yeah, so it's really everything that's running the show, right? It's all the stuff underneath. It's kind of like when we talked about it's not your fault, right? If you could have fixed this or figured out you would. So let me give you a very real life example. If any of you are listening, you've been through a divorce or a breakup, right? And we do the things we're told to do after that. We talk about it in therapy. We talk about it with our girlfriends. We read the books. We go to the retreats. We listen to the stuff. We do all the things. All of it's beneficial, but at a certain point, that story, going back into it over and over and over again, it keeps you stuck. It keeps you from ever getting to cross that bridge, if you will, to actually have the life and the relationship that is really meant for you. And so a lot of times, just based on what we're told to do is what we think it has to happen. We have to talk about it over and over again and unpack it and do all of these things, which at a certain point actually becomes detrimental because, like you're talking about your GPS. I love that because the GPS is also your unconscious mind. And everything that we're saying to ourselves or out into the world, oftentimes it's, we're feeding our GPS of here's where we're going. But here's the problem is that every single day we think between 70 and 80,000 thoughts. 90% of those thoughts are recycled, meaning they're the same thoughts that we thought yesterday, the day before, the week before, probably the year before, for sure in the middle of the night when you wake up and you're like running through all the scenarios and all the things and your brain won't shut off. And the problem with that is 75% of those recycled thoughts are negative. And I get a lot of pushback on that because my clients are like, oh no, I am so good on mindset. I've done every mindset work in the world. Like I am so clear. I will blah, blah, blah. I will never do this. I don't want to ever be in a position where I'm not loved and cherished and respected. I don't ever want to be in, this another job where I'm not respected by, my colleagues. I don't. Well, the issue is the unconscious mind doesn't hear clarifying don'ts. All it knows is focused on. So it doesn't hear, I don't. So what we're feeding the nav system is professional environments where I am minimized, right? And so that's what we're feeding our nav system. And that's then what continues to show up in our world.
It's so funny you said that because when you were listing those examples, I just kept saying, this sounds very negative.
Right.
Like I totally caught that. And I know that you had another thing you were going to explain beyond that, but it also reminds me of those parenting books I used to read when my kids were much, much younger in their toddler days of how to speak to them. And one of the pieces of advice was to not tell them all the time what they can't do. Reframe it to what they can do. Because if we're saying, for example, don't hit your brother, what they just hear is hit brother, right? They don't hear the don't. And so what I find really interesting about what you're saying is that we don't ever untrain ourselves of that. Like that's kind of still how our brain's working a little bit. So that's really interesting. But please go on. I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, it's exactly the same thing. And the interesting thing about that is the unconscious mind operates roughly about a 5 to 7-year-old child. It is literal. If you give it clear instructions, it wants to please you, wants to follow that. If you give it hazy, vague instructions, it will misbehave. And the thing about your unconscious mind is it will never make you a liar. So if you say, everyone I meet is the same, they're all this way. Every place I work, my boss, my CEO, whatever, doesn't like me. I never find a parking spot when it's raining. You're declaring those things and your unconscious mind will never make you a liar. So it's going to say, okay, got it. We're going to make sure the things that you are saying, which is the destination in our nav system, we're going to get there. We were talking about values earlier. And so for me, my values for myself as a human and a mama and a wife and all the things, but also for my business is love, generosity, impact, the belief in what's possible and being a magnet for miracles.
Nice.
And
I love it.
being able to teach being a magnet for miracles is one of my favorite things. And it's that process of over a 72-hour time span, actually rewiring the neural pathways in your brain to flip that way of thinking. And it's so incredibly simple and so powerful, but it really is. And, that's not an arbitrary number. Like neuroscience wise, we know that we can do this in 72 hours. It doesn't take prep. It just takes a little intention and a very fancy technology tool of a rubber band. So it's very, very high tech. But then the important piece on the other side of that is like in my work, in your work, we really help get this clarity piece. But then, to circle back and answer the question about the patterns, how do we fix it, right? So the next part of that in my work is dysfunction detox, where we actually get to blow out all of that strategy, behavior, neurology, ways of thinking, ways of being in a way that we're not going back into the old story. And to do that, I use something called quantum time release. And quantum time release is, been used for hundreds of years. There's not very many of us in the world that do it, but it's really a multidimensional technique to be able to release all of that cellular weight of those negative emotions that we hold in our body in a painless, peaceful way that doesn't re-traumatize. And so it's an unconscious process, meaning you're not unconscious. You would be very comfy somewhere. But we're tapping into that unconscious mind for the answers of like, what was the root cause of those things, which if nothing, you have conscious memory of. So there's not going to be fear or sadness or anything that happens in the process. But if you think about all of those negative emotions, anger, sadness, fear, guilt, shame, all the things we say about ourselves, limiting beliefs, etc. If you imagine that each one of them has its own ribbon. And throughout our lifetime, anytime we have a significant emotional experience with anger, a marble goes on the ribbon. With sadness, a marble goes on the sadness ribbon. Shame, marbles go on the shame. So today, when something happens that makes us angry, it's not the today thing so much. It's the 30, 40, 50, 60 years of marbles behind it. It's the charge, right? It's the gestalt. It's the sum of
It's like the movie Inside Out.
Yes. So what quantum time release does is it actually releases all of that from the body, all of that cellular memory and that weight. So then you can actually have room for what's meant for you. I a couple of months ago, I cleaned out the pantry, which I hadn't done in quite some time. And I love organization and I love everything to have spot. But I also have ADD. So all of a sudden things pile up around me and it makes me crazy. And then I just want to close the door and not deal with it. But the pantry was a mess. And so it was a Saturday morning and I took everything out. And my husband's like, you're like in your happy space. So I took it all out and it was all over the kitchen and I cleaned the pantry. And then as I'm looking at all of this stuff, like there was expired pasta sauce and like half open boxes of orzo and, just crackers sitting over, whatever. So
your pantry sounds like mine right now.
Right? So I threw away all the expired stuff and all that stuff, right? And then I put everything back and everything had a place and there was like room for, stuff. And it's like, we have to do the same. All the expired ways of thinking and the old identities and the old ways of processing, we got to throw it out. So there's room to actually be able to receive what's next for us and what's meant for us. Just like our closets, we shove it full of clothes that maybe we're going to wear again someday. And then we look at our closet and it's like, there's nothing to wear and there's no room for one other single thing. Well, we got to get rid of all that stuff so that we can, have room. So it's the same internally with our programming and our, the rewiring of that. But very important to note, I think a lot of people get really worried when you start talking about doing the work that they're going to have to tell the story again. And the thing about this particular process and the framework and the methodology is we're not telling the story again. We get about it. So as far as like that therapeutic loop, that we're not doing that. That's not inside of this. So I don't know if you've ever done therapy. I did a lot of it in my 20s. And I remember a couple of times where like my therapist moved out of state or no longer in the whatever. And the thought of having to like catch somebody up so overwhelming that it, for a long time, it would keep me from actually going back. And I hear this so many from my clients. They're like, it's so exhausting. And to the point where I actually wrote a document and then I sent it and said, hey, charge me for a session, but read this because I'm not going to, so it takes hours, like get caught up on me before I get there. And I think it's such a critical piece when we're talking about like the dysfunction detox and the quantum time release of like releasing all of that. We're not going to reinstall the traumatic neurology. Like you actually then get rid of it so that you have that closet or that pantry that now has space for what you really want. Now that we've figured out what that is, right? In the clarity.
Right. Yeah. And you have clarity on what that is. So the quantum release part of it, is that like a type of session that you have, like a therapeutic session, like hypnosis type of thing? I mean, I know it's not hypnosis, but like that kind of thing? Or is the quantum release the entire framework that you're talking about?
Great question. So the framework is the quantum pattern protocol, and that's clear, create, claim. Inside of those are like 3 steps each, right? The clarity, the dysfunction detox, activation. And then now that we've gotten clear and cleared it all out, now we get to create, like figure out who you are and then step into that. And then that's where we replace the neurology and the strategy and the behavior and the ways of thinking that we blew away. Because we alluded to this earlier when we talk about clarity and awareness being the foundation for any kind of growth or lasting change. But if we take those things away and we don't replace them with something else, it's why people say, I've been in therapy for years. I've done all this work. And then this thing happened and I made all this progress. And then this thing happened and bam, I went right back to where I was 10 years ago, the way that I responded or whatever. And it's because the unconscious mind can't fill in a blank. So if you don't replace that, of course, it goes back to the only thing it knows. That's why we see these circumstances keep showing up over and over again. And so the quantum time release is a session inside of the protocol of the framework. It's
Okay.
about 3 hours, and then there's some integration after, but yeah.
That's so fascinating. Actually, I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I want to find out just more of at a personal level. Can you take us back to a moment maybe in your own life as a mom when you realized that something had to change for you, either how you were showing up or even just in any of your goals, your ambitions that you have? And then what was happening then and what shifted for you? How did you come through? I mean, obviously, at some point, I'm sure you used your own framework, but
This work was designed for me, and it came out of exactly like the line in the sand.
oh, okay.
I mean, so really, I created this work for me first.
Okay.
It's kind of like there's a bit of context I think that's needed. So my parents got divorced when I was very young, grew up with my mom in Minnesota, dad was in California, very hit or miss here and there. I went off to college. He said, listen, I never helped your mom. I didn't ever help you. I'm going to take care of room and board freshman year. Great. That's a huge relief. Back to college, doing the whole freshman thing, like 6 weeks in, whatever it was, and housing called and said, hey, listen, your bill was never paid and you're maxed on all of your student loans. So I was like, okay, well, what do I do? I'm 18. Do I just quit school? What do I do? So I tapped into that part of me that's resourceful. And I think this is a really important distinction for everybody to hear. Oftentimes, when we're faced with challenges or things that we don't really know how to get to the other side of, we think that we're stuck because it's a lack of resources, money, support, energy, time, whatever it is. But really, it's a lack of resourcefulness. And we all have it, but you have to tap into it. So I left the dorm. I got 3 jobs. I rented a 5-bedroom house. I filled the other 4 bedrooms, did my thing. But there was probably a moment there for me, couldn't articulate it at 18, but I can look back now and say, oh, there's that piece of why do I not matter enough as a father to put me in this position where then I had to like scramble and figure it out and disrupt. And then I went and got married at 23. We got married way too young, but I was certain at the ripe old age of 23 that nobody was going to love me and I was going to end up alone. So irrational, but that was some of my internal unconscious story.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lonely marriage. There were a lot of things. We had our miracle child, right? We had Maddie when she was 6 weeks, ended it, and it turned volatile and really awful in ways that I didn't think it would, which then put me into that therapy situation, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'll figure this out, and my focus is Maddie, and that's like my whole care in the world was like Maddie and being the best mama I could. But then 3 years goes by, and now she's 9, and we were in Minnesota, and it was freezing. Okay, like I was born in Maui. My DNA is I'm an island girl. I'm not made for cold weather. So
I'm with you on that.
so I lived there the majority of my life. But it had been one of those winters where it was like spring, and it was April, and we just gotten like a foot of snow. But there had been multiple days like 30, 40 below zero. And Maddie and I lived in this little like 100-year-old farm cottage, and we had horses and chickens and this little pond that in the summer every Sunday we would dye it blue so it looked like the ocean, and she would like be on her little floaty. I mean, it was pretty magical in that sense. But it was so cold that the metal snapped off of the well pump thingy that the horse was attached to water horses. So for the remainder of the winter, I had to run a hose through the window and unhook my washing machine and hook it up to the washing machine and give the horses water. I mean, I was just over it. So my father came to visit that spring, and again, he's been living his life in California. He's got, family, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, listen, I think it's the perfect time you guys should move to California. And, at this time I was, yes, doing personal development, but I was also running practice development for the largest independently owned oncology group in the Midwest, and being a mama, and just, that was my number one priority. But I was tired and I was sick of the cold. And even though everything inside of me said, this is crazy, don't do this, don't do this. I said to him, I'm like, look, I'm not moving on a whim for one of your big ideas, because he's super charming, but he's also full-blown narcissist, right? And my mom had a surgery, and they nicked a nerve in her neck, and she couldn't use her arm, and she didn't use it. And I'm like, I'm not leaving my mom, I'm not leaving the horses, and I'm only going to disrupt Maddie's life one time. I moved around a lot as a child. He said, no problem, bring your mom, bring the horses, I'll build a barn. Here's the financials, you could see them, like, you take this business and do with it. And I was like, okay. And it wasn't even like little red flags. It was like standing in Times Square and looking around at every billboard screaming at me, no, 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 no. But I wanted what I wanted, and I ignored all of that. And I packed up my mom and my daughter and 2 horses and 3 cats, and we moved to California. I didn't know anybody here. So at first, it was like a fantasy land, family dinners, and we were all spending time together. My parents were like friends and hanging out, but we'd go up on the weekends with the horses. It was just magical. And I had kind of a pit in my stomach, but I didn't know what it was. I thought it was, I just was really worried. I wanted Maddie to make friends and be happy because I just took her out of the only life that she'd ever known. A few months in, and I will never forget, it was December 1st because Maddie's birthday is November 30th, and she had turned 9, and we celebrated and had a little party. And my father left that next morning to take like girlfriend number 400 back to South Dakota or wherever they were going. And I was in the studio, and this man had come who worked for him prior to my arrival. And there was this thing with the mailer the year before. So he was coming to take the mailers for me and go deal with the post office. Great. And so he was there, and I heard some noise, and I looked around kind of into the front of the retail part of the studio, and all these people are coming in and guns drawn, pointed at me and put me in handcuffs.
Oh, wow.
And in the moment, my first thought was, I don't know what's going on, but my little girl, my mom went to pick her up at school with a new friend for the first time, and they're going to be home in 20 minutes. And the studio and the house were on the same lot. Like, I need to call her. And they're like, you're not calling anybody. So long story short, we don't have 10 hours, but I found myself in the middle of a huge DEA investigation.
Oh my goodness.
Which went on for like 2 years. But in this moment, and the immediate aftermath was, I now have no business, no income. All the assets were frozen. This idea of having this relationship with my father and this family unit, and Maddie could be with her grandparents, gone. And I had to make a choice again. Do I take us back to Minnesota, which we could have done in a heartbeat? Or do I keep my promise to my little girl and break generations of broken promises and lack of integrity? And at the end of the day, that was the most important thing to me. So that was like that moment of nothing else matters more. So then, therapy and talking about it, writing him letters, not sending them because you can't give any response to a narcissist. In the mix of that, thought this would be a great time to start dating. I haven't dated at all. So of course, I'm being sarcastic, of course. And I went on and I signed up on Match.com, and I was sitting there. It was a Monday night, and I was like, okay. And then all these things happen. If you've ever been on a dating app, like 5 million people are like sending you messages. It's ridiculous. And then I went on a date, a few weeks later with somebody, and I knew from the moment it was just so not right. Like, so not right. But I was still now even more in my unconscious story that broken. Like, there's something wrong with me. Like, this is like a bad Lifetime movie. And so I talked myself into, well, what if this is it? What if this is it? And if I don't adapt and make some compromises, and maybe my expectations are too high, whatever. So then I let myself get into a very abusive relationship.
Oh, dear.
Not physically, thankfully, but mentally and emotionally and psychologically. And it took me a long time to be able to untangle that and get out of it. And that was the moment that I said never again. That was the moment that I said, I will never let myself be in a position where I am told out of one sentence, you are too much. So I'd like you to tone yourself down, but you're not enough in this way. So I'd like you to be more of this. And just the crazy abuse, because I'm like, I don't want Maddie to ever think that this is what a healthy relationship looks like.
Right.
And it was then that I was like, okay, therapy, fine, but therapy isn't going to fix the problem. Therapy isn't going to heal and take care of what I need to actually take care of, which is all this internal stuff. Not that I had the words for it at the time. It wasn't my in frameworks at the time. It was knowing that there had to be a better way. And I remember doing like a Saturday, like Brene Brown 2-hour workshop or something. And in that process, it was like, we made this list of like our ideal person, right? And it kind of was the basis of like my menu now, right? And yours, values and non-negotiables and desires, just all the stuff, right? And you make this list, and I threw it in a drawer, and I never felt sorry. Then I started seeking, and I found some work. Then that kind of became the basis. It was my first introduction to quantum time release. And that was the part where I went, whoa, like in a matter of weeks, there was parts of me that I didn't recognize in all the best ways. And I was like, okay, there's a different way. It doesn't have to take years of talking about in therapy. We don't have to go back and unpack everything and analyze it and ask your inner child. And like, all of that is great in its own place. But when you get to the point that you've done the work, you've done all that, right? Don't come to me if you haven't done any therapy and you're like on the floor in crisis, because you got to have some of that self-awareness and do some of that like healing work. But it was then that I went, this is it. And then I spent years like going and getting super clear and, my training expertise, and then really being able to create my method and my framework so that there is a framework and a methodology. It's not just some theoretical fairy dust. And so that for me, I know it was a very long answer to your question, but I felt like the context was important leading up.
Absolutely.
And so that was that moment where, like, as a mama, as a woman, as somebody who knew that there's a lot more meant for me in my life and my future, that's what brings us here today, where I get to do this work that I was called to do in the world. And on the flip side of that, I just celebrated 2 years of being married to the most incredible man in the entire world, the love of my life, which I never thought would happen for me. I really didn't.
Congratulations on, just how you were able to kind of recover and move forward and figuring things out and how hard it must have been. And look at you today. It's just really, really amazing. And also, thank you so much for sharing so deeply and being so vulnerable. I find your story very inspiring. It shows the power of what you're doing. Many of us may not have experienced some of the more extreme aspects of your story, but we still want what you managed to achieve. I think that it just highlights how powerful your methodology is.
When you start and you look at the framework and you clear and then you create and then you get to claim. And so after we do all of that and we give you the skills to go with the knowledge so your unconscious mind isn't taking you back, then we step into that final phase, which is the claim phase. And that's where you get to own it and integrate it and embody it. But it's also where, like, when you own this new version of you, this new identity, like, you don't need the external permission. You don't need somebody to tell you that this is the right decision or not. It's also where you get to fall in love with yourself again and trust yourself again and confidently hold boundaries and expertly communicate your needs and really deepen the richness in every single one of your relationships. And then when you integrate that with your energy, your decisions, that becomes who you are. And then you embody her and you love and live and lead from this new frequency. And so it's like, that's like with your life plan, like this, the roadmap start to finish. It's like, we're going to start here but we're going to take you all the way through to like literally claiming that new identity.
Yeah. I really appreciate that you shared your story. I actually did not know any of that about you because I'm very new to your business. I'm glad I asked it because even though it must have been hard for you to share, because I think it really did demonstrate so many parts of your framework and process and the rationale behind your method.
I think it's so important, right? Because in the world that we live in, we see the highlight reels of life, right? So you see the Instagram, you see the whatever, and it's like all these things, but every single one of us has a story. And we all go through these things. And the difference between being in your story and standing on your story. So if I was still in the story and you're telling the story and your heart is racing and your palms are getting sweaty or the pit in your stomach or there's lots of tears, you're still very much in the story. Whereas when you can actually forgive, that anger and sadness that I was feeling all the time was destroying you. It just eats you up. And so being able to actually forgive and just take back your own power and be like, it doesn't get to control my thoughts and my feelings and my behaviors and my actions anymore. And that's when you switch from being in your story to on your story and having this thing define you to having it refine you. Because when we talk about gratitude, we often are talking about the things we're so grateful for, the good stuff, but you have to be grateful for it all, right? I'm so grateful that I ended up in handcuffs with guns pointing at my head in this horrific situation, because without that, I wouldn't be the mama. I wouldn't be married to Pete. I wouldn't be doing this work that changes not only the lives of the women that I work with, but their families, their communities. So I'm grateful for it. And so I appreciate your acknowledging, but I think the story is important, because this is not like, I didn't go to like Jay Shetty's coaching school and here's my little bit. Like, I lived it. I created it. And now I get to share it with other people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really powerful and impressive. As you talk about the story, right? Our story, I almost feel like a life plan is that rewriting of the story. I always think of it as a roadmap or a plan, but it kind of is in a little bit. This is the story of what I want my life to be, and this is how I plan to get there. But now, if a high achieving mom, who has a lot on her plate, really busy at home, at work, etc., what's some sort of like micro task that they can do, a habit to just feel more grounded and clear without feeling like she has a ton to do to get to this place?
I'm actually going to share with you, and again, this is like what I do with my private clients. All my work is private. It's not group. It's because it's very,
individual.
Stays the same, but every person is different. But let's, as quickly as I can, I want to walk you through that 72-hour process of becoming a for miracles, because this is something that you can all do that can literally change your life.
Okay.
So I want you to think about your life as a cake. Okay. And all of the things in your life that aren't working in the way in which it could or should. Kind of think about that as the cake, right? Whether it's your stress, your work, your relationships, your money, your health, whatever it is, your dirty car, like think of all of that as a cake. So if we bake a cake and it comes out and we let it cool and we take a bite and it doesn't taste very good, how are we going to bake a better cake? We're going to look at the ingredients, right? So all of us as human beings are governed by 4 states: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. the physical is the last to show up. That's what everything we're dealing with in our tangible world. The ingredients are the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual, right? So if the cake doesn't taste good, we have to look at what the ingredients were. Back to our earlier conversation, the ingredients are the thoughts that we're thinking. That's the very first thing, because every thought has a vibration and a belief and a consequence, and it causes a physiological reaction in the body. And it only takes 17 seconds of holding a thought with emotion to either reinforce or create new neural pathways.
Wow.
So when you think about all the times that you're thinking about things that you don't want, right? All of that is reinforcing that nav system of here's where we're going. So here's what we're going to do. You need 2 pieces of paper and a rubber band. And not
all right, let's do this, guys.
Right? Not like a scrunchy one, like a one that hurts. It has to sting because the brain needs the pattern interrupt.
Okay.
I want you to think about 2 lists, and I want you to think about them first as walls. So if you're sitting in a room with 4 walls, to your left, to your right, in front of you, and behind you, one of those walls is going to be your away wall, okay? And on that wall is everything you don't want. So this is the only time I'm giving you permission to focus on all the things I want you to write it all down, all of it, everything you don't want ever again, more of, whatever. And then I want you to imagine, like, in a room for you, where's that wall? Is it, to your left? Is it behind you? And then your other wall is your toward wall, and your toward wall is everything you want for yourself in your life. Magic wand, fairy dust, goals, wishes, dreams. And don't filter yourself. I'm too old. It's too late. No, everything that you want is on that list. Okay. Then I would really invite you to take photos of both of those lists and then put them on your phone. So either pin them to the top of a note or put them in an album that you can very, very easily access. And then should you accept this invitation for the next 72 hours, here's how we're going to play. You are going to make those lists first. You are going to put a rubber band on your wrist that does not come off for the next 72 hours or whenever you start. And as you go through life, right, so busy moms, don't feel like this is a thing you have to, you're just going to keep doing life. But what we're going to do over the next 72 hours is retrain that brain. So as you're going along in your day, I want you to snap that rubber band every time you find yourself thinking about something that either like your heart's racing or it's making you anxious or there's a lot of fear or doubt or uncertainty or it's really negative. And when you catch yourself, I want you to snap the rubber band. I want you to figure out what it was that you were thinking about. I promise you it was something on the away wall list. And then I want you to replace it. And if you can, whatever that was on the away wall, like what's the opposite of that on the toward wall? So like, whatever that is. And I want you to actually hold that with emotion as though it already is true, right? Because the brain doesn't know the difference between something that actually happens and something that we can visualize with all the senses. So holding that vision starts to rewire where we're going in our nav system. Now, the very first day, I don't suspect you're going to snap it very much because you've been operating like this for decades. But even if it's hours go by and all of a sudden you just feel yucky and you're just like, you feel off, snap it. Try to recall the last thing you were thinking about and pick something else, okay? Now, there's other ways to choose a better feeling thought. If your toward wall list isn't accessible or whatever, you can actually just sit for 60 seconds in gratitude of something you're really grateful for right now. And not like the Pollyanna, I'm so grateful for my life. Like, I'm so grateful because it's been raining for 5 days and I'm sitting here and the sun is shining through the window of my car. Like something that's genuine and real in the moment. Sending a thought or, doing something for someone else. So who can I serve in this moment? And it does not have to be a big grand gesture. It can literally be a prayer, a thought, a text to a friend says, hey, love you. It can be, noticing that your neighbor's newspapers are piling up and just tossing them in the recycle for them. Like something outside of your head in service of someone else. What you're going to notice is day 2, you'll start snapping it more. Day 3, you're snapping it a lot. Now, the point of this is not to have some Pollyanna, you're never going to have these thoughts again. You're human. Of course you are. It's to get you out of it as fast as possible. Because the longer you sit in that, that's what you're marinating in. That's what you're reinstalling for your neurology. That's your nav system directions. So the point of this rewiring your brain is to recognize it and go, oh, all right, I'm going to flip that. Because the faster you can do that, you're going to watch your life change. The cake is going to be amazing. And it's really, really, really powerful. And it's so funny because a lot of people will say, honestly, I thought this was stupid. And like, why was I doing this? Like, blah, blah, blah. And then literally things will happen for them in their life that completely shifts. And they're like, oh my God, that was amazing. I've never noticed this amazingness happening.
Within the 72 hours or just after they've...
It literally changes things in your physical world really, really fast.
Yeah.
So my daughter and I play a game called the parking spot game, and her friends will even call her and be like, what is the parking spot thing that you do all the time? Because there's always a parking spot for us. Because we've declared that. Like,
Yeah.
that's our neurology. And I use that as an example because if you have people in your world that complain about everything, like one of those stupid little things that they're like, and there's never a parking spot, and when I get my hair cut, they always do it wrong, and blah, 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 like everything's just always wrong, and it just always happens to them. And you're like, yes, and it will always continue to do that unless you break this pattern and rewire. So play the game, play full out, come and tell us what happens.
Yeah.
This is something you can do right now.
Yeah.
Costs zero money and can change the entire trajectory of your life.
And I think it's so much more powerful for this to be something for a mom to try, because I know when I'm around somebody who has that pessimistic outlook, they're stewing in that negative storyline for themselves, right? It kind of diffuses over to me, you know? I start to feel kind of negative about things, even though I do feel like I have a lot of resilience to that kind of thing. If you're a mom, like, we're role models for our children. I don't want to be shedding that negative self-talk or negative outlook and have that be the model for my kids, right? Or have them feel pessimistic about things because I'm feeling sorry for myself or something, you know? So I think what's really cool is that if you try something like this and it changes your view on things and the story you're telling yourself, that is now something that our kids will observe, you know? So yeah. I love it.
It changes the mama that you are. It also changes how you occur in the world, and it will change how your children learn to see themselves in the world as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean to say. Yep, thank you. All right. Well, you, I know, are really busy. You've been extra generous with your time. I really appreciate that. Thanks for making that exception. I will take the last couple minutes for you to please tell us how we can connect with you, find you, where do you show up? And I heard you have something special for us too.
So I'm on all the socials, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, at Riana Malia. Of course, the website, rianamalia.com, where you can find all of these things. But also, I want to give every single one of you a gift. So we have created a diagnostic assessment called the Extraordinary Love Index, and we lovingly call her Ellie. And Ellie answers the question, what is standing between you and extraordinary love? Now, that could be romantic love. It can also be self-love. It can also be any kind of love that you can imagine, right? Family dynamics, whatever. And this is not like a 2-minute what Disney princess quiz are you situation. It's 40 questions. So it is an actual scientific diagnostic. But so give yourself, 10 or 15 minutes to answer it thoughtfully, because it's looking at 9 key areas, right? Impact and communication and all the trauma and all this stuff. And then I'm going to send you a 28-page personalized report with all of your results. And we're going to look at your scores, and we're going to look at what that means. And I'm going to lay out for you every single piece. And I'm going to show you, like, because of this, how you scored here, and specifically this is what might be showing up in your life. Because earlier you're seeing some of these things, like this is, you're people pleasing, or you're resentful, or whatever. Here's the cost for you to stay in this space. And here's something that you can do right now to start yourself in a day. I think everyone in the world should take the Ellie, because it's going to give you so much insight about you. And that's the most important piece. So I would love to gift that to all of your listeners. So of course, that's on the website. It's on all the socials. It's also simply at quiz.rianamalia.com. And go take the Ellie. And I actually review every single one of the results. Like, I look at them, and there's probably, I think, about 3,000 women that have taken it now since we launched.
Amazing.
6 months. And that data, like that information, and seeing different patterns and seeing different things, it's just tremendously useful for all of us to have about ourselves.
Right. That's amazing. Thank you so much. That sounds really great. I am going to make sure to have everything that you just mentioned linked in the show description and notes and stuff, so that people can access it. So definitely go right now, click on that and take your diagnostic. So thank you so much again. And I know you have to run off. You've got another meeting. So it's been really wonderful having you on the show, and thanks for, reaching out and stuff.
My pleasure.
Okay, ladies, there you have it. The very enlightening Riana Malia. I'm going to link her details in the show notes, and we'll see you in the next episode. I hope today's episode will help you create time and freedom to pursue something you love to do. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and tell other purpose-driven mamas about it. Who knows? You might even make a new friend by sharing a tip. It's all free. By the way, it would be amazing to hear what you think about the show when you leave a review on Apple Podcasts. After all, my passion is to make this a great experience for you. I'll see you next week for another episode of Achieve Your Ambitious Mom Life with Anoki Kapasi.